3 months, the gospel says. And then she went back home. What happens when she gets home? She's found to be expecting a child. Can you imagine what the people were saying? What the neighbors were saying? What did her parents even think? You've been away for 3 months. We believed that you were a good girl. What happened when you were away? Can you imagine the humiliation, the misunderstanding that our Blessed Mother must have gone through? Joseph, whom she loved, and who truly and in the most wonderful way loved her, says, well, with a genuine love, he says, well, what can I do? Divorce. To try and save her. That shows how serious it was. Even if she had told that she had conceived by the Holy Spirit, no one was believing her. If anybody would have believed her, surely it was Joseph who really loved her. But he decides to divorce her. Imagine the suffering, the misunderstanding, the heartache. And that's not all. The question that I have, and anyway, I hope it will be answered when we're in heaven, is why did God not send another angel to Joseph at the same time as he sent Gabriel to Mary? To say to him, look after your beloved. She is the chosen one to be the mother of the Messiah, the long-awaited Messiah. Cherish her, support her, and her child. None of that. The mystery of God's will and the mystery of suffering in good people. Our Blessed Mother had done nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing. She's the Immaculate Conception, as she said at Lourdes. And as the Church teaches, obviously. Conceived immaculate. She did nothing. But look how she had to suffer. How does God treat His chosen ones? And what is that saying to us about suffering? When we suffer, do we think we're being punished by God? Maybe, my brothers and sisters, it's a sign of God's favor. I know it's not easy, but I think that's the way we've got to think sometimes. It's not a sign that God is punishing us. Most probably. I mean, we can never say exactly what God is doing and what God is not doing, because we are not God. And He is absolutely sovereign. But it's very unlikely that suffering is punishment. When good people suffer, that it's punishment. And yet how many people think of that? And that's hard to take, but I believe that's very true. That suffering seems as though it could have been avoided if God sent an angel to Joseph earlier. There is right almost from the very beginning, we see the suffering of our Blessed Mother, and that requires strength. Doesn't that require power? The power of God to accept that. The next thing comes. The time comes for her to give birth to her child. And I don't know too much about these things, but I'm sure that both of them, Joseph and Mary, hoped that they would be able to go to Bethlehem and register and then get back before the child was born, so that the child could be born at home. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong in that. I mean, not worrying about the scriptures and the prophecies about Bethlehem and all the rest of it. Just from a very human point of view, I'm sure they hoped that they would be home by the time the child came. But no. And not only did our Blessed Mother have to have her baby while she was away from home, but did anybody care enough to give her a place where she could deliver her baby? No one. Tough luck. We're all right. We've got a room for the night. Tough on you. Tough. No problem. I'm fine. What a pity you don't have a place. What would that do to a mother? To experience that from other people, the lack of care. Imagine the strength that she needed to keep going. And of course, in the right spirit. So, she has to give birth among animals. My brothers and sisters, don't we look at a crib at Christmas and we have this lovely romantic picture. Oh, how wonderful, the Son of God coming amongst us. But do we think of what that must have cost our Blessed Mother? And how difficult it must have been for her. Also, not to have a place to put the child, except the trough that the cattle eat out of. If it was me, I don't know, I trust the grace of God. But I think it was quite possible, if that was me, I would have been angry with God. And I would have said to him, is this the way you treat your servants? Is this the way you treat me when I'm trying to do my best for you? Did our Blessed Mother do that? Was she bitter? No. No bitterness in her. And how do we know she didn't have that bitterness in her heart? It's because the Gospel tells us that Mary treasured the message that the shepherds had brought of the wonder of angels that they had seen announcing the birth. And they went and told Mary and Joseph what they had seen. And the Gospel says our Blessed Mother treasured that. If in her heart she was bitter because of the way God had treated her and was angry with God, there would have been no place in her heart to treasure the wonderful message of the shepherds, and it would have escaped her also. And so too for us. My sisters and brothers, we have to be so careful that we don't allow bitterness in our hearts when things don't go the way we would like them to be, when our lives don't turn out the way we would like them to be, when we are not the kind of people we would like to be. And I'm certainly not the kind of priest that I thought I would be when I was preparing for the priesthood. That's a long story which I won't go into, but it's absolutely true. And I'm sure my brothers here will say the same. Yeah? Oh, things turn out differently. But we've got to accept, have the strength to accept what the Lord places in our lives. Then perhaps we will also be able to wonder and ponder the wonderful, as Mary did, the wonderful message of the Scriptures. When we move on in the Gospel too, it's very interesting that nowhere, except right at the end, do we see that the Lord gives any credit or any sign of significance to our Blessed Mother directly. Never. At Cana in Galilee, she says, and it's interesting, by the way, at Cana in Galilee, who is the one that notices that there's no wine? Who notices? Not Jesus, not the Son of God. I'm not saying he didn't know it or he didn't notice it. We don't know. But it's very, very interesting. The gospel tells us it was Mary who noticed that they had no wine and went to him and told him. Because obviously she seemed to think that he didn't notice. Son, they have no wine. What's that got to do with me? My time's not yet come. But she doesn't give up. She says to the stewards, do whatever he tells you. That strength of perseverance. She believed, she hoped. And of course, it paid off. There was an abundance of wine. But the point that I'm trying to make is that our Blessed Mother is not given any credit by Jesus in his words. Who are my mother and my brothers? Those who do the will of my Father. And of course, I'm not saying our Blessed Mother, of course she did the will of God. But he could have said, yes. And although she is my physical mother, she is the perfect example of the will of God. Look at her. Jesus did not say that. He gives her no encouragement in his words, no support, as it were. And that I find quite mysterious. Don't we too sometimes have to struggle as we live our lives of faith? And we wonder, Lord, where are you? Do you appreciate what I'm trying to do? And like our Blessed Mother, sometimes there is no answer.